Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see everyone arriving. Yeah, here we go again, um, chewing on some dry bones. Let's begin with some prayers. Try to set a motivation. Take refuge and set a bodhicitta motivation. Sangye churang soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi Dagi chunyen gipe sugnam ki drola penche sange drupasho. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye churang soki chognam la Changchu Badu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sognam Ki Drola Penche Sange Drupa Sho. And then a short mandala offering to create the karma to be successful in listening to the teaching, and also as an offering to the primordial Buddhas to send down a rain of Dharma. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lamas, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be subdued, the needs of those to be trained. And I just, my eye just caught that plural particle. I think they're Jesun Lama Damba Kenam Ki. I think that's a plural there. So it should be, as I had recited, O holy and perfect pure Lamas. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, good to see all of you. We're going to begin, as is our tradition here, with some sitting meditation. Try to calm the mind and implement the meaning of the words that we have just recited. So sit comfortably. Relax your body and mind. Place your attention on the respiration. And once you've located it, keep it with the mental factor mindfulness. Keep it in mind to the exclusion of other things, utilizing the mental factor introspection or sort of mental spy to make sure that your mind is not tempted into multitasking, thinking of other things at the same time. in popular culture. Sometimes when people are upset, someone else, a helper or a medical person, will say, breathe, as though just be mindful of the fact that you're breathing, and that helps calm them down a little bit. Here we're going much further than that. We're trying to exclude our mind wandering onto the other thoughts that had preceded this meditation, continuity of conceptualizations, to try to start out with a clean slate, so to speak, the clean tabletop, in order to construct some virtuous states of mind. And then if you've had a little success in stopping the other conceptual thoughts, bring your attention now to the mental consciousness, a more subtle object. Withdrawing your attention away from your eyes, your ears, nose, tongue, and taste, body consciousnesses. Just look at what is in your mind. So the various states of mind, emotions, memories, plans, observations about the present, inner dialogue that's going on are all objects of the mental consciousness. The mental consciousness itself being the subject that has those objects. Withdrawing your attention away from the objective thoughts and so forth, try to be mindful of the subjective mind within which they're arising. Which is clean and clear, what we call clear light. Part of the definition of consciousness, which is, as you remember, that which is clear in knowing. So this clarity refers at least to this conventional clear light nature of the mind. It's conventional nature that allows content to emerge into it, to arise within it from the mind itself, from the imprints within the mind. And allows their reabsorption back into the mind when we don't pay attention to those thoughts. Focusing on this clear light nature, conventional clear light nature of the mind, is what is referred to as the Mahamudra, Sutra Mahamudra, in the writings, especially of Lama Tsongkhapa and the Gelugpa Lamas that followed him. It is recognized that conventional clear light nature of the mind, the fact that it doesn't offer any resistance to the emergence or reabsorption of thoughts, that is recognized as the conventional Buddha nature or developmental Buddha nature. As opposed to, so that conventional nature of the mind, as opposed to the ultimate nature of the mind, its lack of inherent existence, reminding ourselves of this, excuse me, again and again, should bring some peace to the mind. That is to say, the feeling, mental factor, aggregate of feeling in our mental consciousness, once we recognize that we have this nature of the mind, should be a joyous state of mind. In analogy, analogous to the bliss that's experienced in tantric meditation. Not the same, but some analogy when we perceive this vast clarity of the mind. Training, remembering that this means that we can become Buddha, that we can become better. We can get rid of our faults. We can develop any good quality. There's nothing beyond our ken. That recognition, sort of a pleasant experience of the mind, having that in conjunction with the experience of the clarity of the mind, the vacuity, is an excellent precursor to the tantric meditations of the generation stage. The fact that we can recognize this clear light nature of the mind right now is due to the fact that we have a life of leisure and endowment, this life as a human being, this auspicious moment that the Buddha proclaimed that was so important, so meaningful, because with it we could do work that we have not been able to do when we were in the unfree states, when there was not this auspiciousness of life as a human with all our senses intact. When the Buddha had turned the wheel of Dharma, those teachings still exist. There are practitioners who practice it and can impart it to us. It's a community of like-minded individuals, benefactors like Shantideva Center that help to provide the teachings. This situation is not everlasting. is changing every moment, and we are like in a free-falling elevator from a very tall building. While we're falling, although we may experience some change in gravity, apparent gravity, we haven't hit the bottom yet. But if we're intelligent, we realize that eventually this elevator ride will end. We are hurtling toward our death, which from a Buddhist perspective here means the end of this life of leisure and endowment. And as beginners, we have no assurity, we have no reason to presume, well, we might think we can presume that we will have another human life in the future. But the causes of a life of leisure and endowment, perfect human rebirth, are very difficult to create, requires pure morality, instances of pure morality that are very powerful, such as taking the 8 Mahayana precepts, things like that. Also adorned with various other virtuous qualities like generosity, the other perfections also, and an aspiration, pure prayer, that we might experience such a life again for the benefit of others. The ultimate benefit, the ultimate usefulness of such a mind, the Buddha said, was to be able to achieve liberation and enlightenment, the two goals of the Buddhist path. Yet the Buddha advised again and again not to be content with a lesser goal of nirvana, an achievement which would mean the end of our suffering and the experience of blissful happiness, but the inability to arise from that once we had passed away, once we'd entered into the nirvana without remainder of the aggregates, the inability to benefit sentient beings directly as a bodhisattva or a Buddha can do. So to instead to strive for the great vehicle, the Mahayana, the doorway to which is the generation of the mind of enlightenment, the mind that strives for bodhi, for enlightenment, full enlightenment, out of a desire to alleviate the suffering of sentient beings, to remove them from the ocean of suffering of cyclic existence. The constant need to, repair your car, to wash, to eat. All these tasks that will never finish within cyclic existence. Remove sentient beings from that and place them in that state of enlightenment. In order to do that, we ourselves, it's not enough that we know how to lead sentient beings through the scriptures, just having general knowledge, but we ourselves have to experience that to become Buddhas so that we can effortlessly, without thinking about it, spontaneously and perfectly, lead sentient beings, however many lives it may take, into that very same state. In order to do that, we need to have the cooperative conditions of the collection of merit and wisdom, which are explained in the Prajna Paramita Sutras, the sutras on the perfection of wisdom by Buddha that were commented on by Nagarjuna, who was prophesied by the Buddha to explain that, especially the perfection of wisdom that leads to the accumulation of the collection of wisdom. In order to achieve enlightenment, we need those two collections, and we need to be able to collect them. We need to know the details about them. We need to know about wisdom. We need to know about how to accumulate merit perfectly, how to purify negative karma. So in that regard, we're going to try to set a motivation to listen to the teachings with a new mind, fresh mind, in order to learn how to accumulate these two collections, and actually try to do that in class by listening, contemplating, and meditating on the material. I'm going to participate today in order to achieve enlightenment so that I myself can lead all my mother sentient beings, my former mothers, my future mothers, if I remain within cyclic existence, lead them out of suffering, the ocean of the suffering of samsara, into that very same state. That's my aim. That's my motivation for listening to the teachings. I'm listening, contemplating, meditating in order to become a Buddha, to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So, how is everyone? Okay. Dora, Louise is okay. Thumbs up. Good to see you all. Or at least to see your placeholders if you're off camera. Know that you're there. Yeah, so this coming week, what's today? Is today what date is today? The 7th, or what is?
The
8th.
The 8th. So on the 11th, so that would be what? Tomorrow's Sunday's the 9th, 10th, 11th. On Tuesday, I guess, right, is the 11th, which this year corresponds to the special holiday, one of the great holidays of the Buddhist calendar. When we say holidays, in our Western culture, almost looks like holly wreaths or something, like something you celebrate, you have a lot of fun, but there actually comes from holy days, in which, from the Buddhist perspective, correspond to days that bring about a higher karmic impact. Whatever virtuous actions that we create on those days becomes more powerful. I can't remember it stated explicitly, but I assume by analogy that any negative actions that we perform on those days also become more powerful.
No,
So-
only good ones.
Not only good ones, right? So it's good to be on your, quote, your best behavior, but to try to do some virtuous actions on those days, if not to dedicate the whole day in some circumstances to trying to create virtue and dedicating that virtue to your quick achievement and enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Now, in that regard, it's been recommended by Lama Zopa Rinpoche and many great lamas that one of the powerful things that one can do on those days, like the descent from the heaven of 33, is to take the Mahayana precepts, the 8 Mahayana precepts, which are similar to, but not exactly the same as the famous 8 precepts in the Theravada tradition. Precepts seem to be the same, but the motivation in the Mahayana precepts is to achieve, taking these in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. So there is a link that I believe Doris has put up there for a video of a teaching that Lama Zopa Rinpoche gave on the 8 precepts, along with the actual ceremony, which you can play in the morning if you would like on that day, and take the precepts for 24 hours. Remember when we said how difficult it is to create the karma to have a life of leisure and endowment? One of the single events that you can do, so the single acts that you can do that can create that karma in one fell swoop, doesn't mean that you will definitely have a human rebirth because of it, but it's very powerful karma to take a life of leisure and endowment as your next life, is to take the 8 Mahayana precepts and keep them, not just to take them, but to keep them for 24 hours. So that is a good recommendation. Mahayana precepts, is that link?
It's just above that.
Yeah, okay, I see. Yeah, so that goes to a YouTube page, very nice, sort of sounds in the background and everything, teaching by Lama Zopa and the 8 Mahayana precepts, which has been used on other occasions at Thupten Norbu Ling and other centers when people want to take the precepts and there's not an actual living ceremony going on. So that's sufficient to do that and to follow along if you have the text. If you don't have the text of the 8 Mahayana precepts, it's easily downloadable from the FPMT website. So that's a suggestion on Tuesday, right, on the 11th. And any other virtuous activities that you do. So many times I've mentioned before on other holidays like this, many of the Chinese students, you know, because they're very, they have incredible faith in the existence of karma and the creation of the benefits of the creation of merit. They will even arrange any offerings that they're going to make to be done on those days. So they will accrue the greatest amount of merit and so forth. Also, in Bodh Gaya, at the Root Center, the Root Institute, which is an FPMT center there, there is I think they're offering the ability for you to subsidize offerings of light around the Mahabodhi Stupa. So if you check to the FPMT centers and you go to their page, the Root Institute in Bodh Gaya. What's that called, Paul? Root Institute. What's it called in Sanskrit? We talked about this before. What's the root of wisdom in?
It would be mula.
Mula, right. So I think I've told you before. Sometime when I've been in Bodh Gaya, and the rickshaw drivers didn't understand English perfectly, and I say I wanted to go to the Root Institute. What? Mula. And they say, oh, mula. So everyone there, all the rickshaw drivers know the destination Mula means the Root Institute. So you can remember, so you can remember Mula Prajna. That's the text by Nagarjuna, the root of wisdom, fundamental wisdom. Okay, so how are we doing? Everyone okay? Anyone have any questions before we dive in? Exercising our intellectual jaw muscles to chew these dry bones. Do you have any questions?
Yes,
Oh, Diana?
Diana.
Yeah, tell me.
Um,
Dimi.
I know that technically people who are doing these 24-hour
Precept.
precepts are usually they start them at dawn.
Right.
If one is not typically awake at dawn, is it better to start it like just after midnight or when one gets up some hours after dawn?
So one can make a motivation when one goes to sleep that one is going to take the Mahayana precepts the next day. Lama Zopa Rinpoche has mentioned, and the former Ganden Tipa, who recently passed away, that we've mentioned several times, used to say this also, that strong motivation itself can propel, even without the ceremony, can, if you're familiar with the precepts and you've taken them before, that's sufficient. But it's also possible to take them if you've forgotten about it and it's like, 10:30 in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you thought, oh, today is a day that I profit by taking the precepts. You can take the precepts then, because the precepts say from now until dawn tomorrow. So the reason for taking it from the dawn of the day that you take it is a longer period that you're creating merit. But if you take it, at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you still accrue, the merit of observing those precepts as you try to keep them for that period of time. So there's two ways you can think about it. You can make a very strong motivation that from the time, from let's say the sunrise, the following day, you go to sleep, and there's going to be sunrise in a couple of hours. From sunrise until the next sunrise, that you will keep the Mahayana precepts. If you're familiar with the precepts, that should be sufficient, but you can go over the ceremony then the next morning, whatever time you get up. Or if you've just forgotten about it completely, you can take them at any time during that next day, and you will accrue the merit for that segment of the day that you have taken the precepts. Does that help?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions? Into? No? Okay. So we've gotten to a point now in the translation by Thupten Jinpa of our Gompa Rapsel text on page 324, refuting that position, which in the FPMT translation by Venerable Joan is on page 183. The Tibetan text just says Nipa la ni, which means the second, the first outline of this subsection was stating the opponent's position. Now the second outline, Nipa, is, or no, not Nipa la ni, Nipa ni. The second outline is as follows. So reading from Thupten Jinpa's text, and for Diana or others that are doing in the, how do you say, the
Digital.
the electronic version that doesn't have page numbers that correspond to the book. The headline here is refuting that position, and it begins, if the opponent argues in the above terms, So this was their position. That is, the Chittamatra position is that there's no external world as a different entity from the consciousness that's perceiving it, yet the consciousness that perceives it is inherently existing. That's their main proposition, these kind of twofold proposition. So if the opponent argues in the above terms, their position would be untenable. We read this last time. Or as Venerable Joan wrote, the Prasangika is saying, that is not reasonable. Or let's say, what do we say? Deni marikte. That's not right. To state this, the text says, in Tobinjama's translation, the next verse, 665, the 66th karika or verse stanza of the Madhyamaka Vatara karikas. Jimpa begins with bracket refutation. So this is the Prasangika position. Since without sight, mental cognitions that perceive blue and so forth occur in a dream, right? We don't have the actual eye consciousness or actual eye organ functioning at that time. We still have an eyeball, right? When you're asleep, you still have your eyeball is there, but the eye and the eye faculty, is the eye faculty existing in the dream, Mikhail?
No, no sense power active during the dream, only mental consciousness.
Why not? Isn't that subtle matter still in the back of the eye consciousness?
But yeah, it's still there, but it's not functioning. Or no,
Why not?
because there are no objects to be
There are
seen.
no, there's nothing there. Yeah, there's some discussion about that. Since without sight, mental cognitions that perceive blue and so forth do occur in a dream, why would such perceptions not arise from its ripened potential for a blind person without eyes? Okay, you have to be careful reading this. So this is the Prasangika position, right? Why would such a perception, say, if you have perception of blue in a dream without the eye consciousness, without the eye faculty active, why would you not have a perception of blue for a blind person? Here it adds a blind person without eyes from its ripened potential. Paul, are you scrutinizing that? Does that make sense? How would you say it?
Well, I think the long way usually just means blind or a blind person, right? So I was just trying to think, I'm assuming what he's saying is that, I guess what the implication is that a blind person would dream and see blue in a dream, but wouldn't when they're awake? Is that sort of the subtext? That's what I was trying to.
I don't think so. I think it's saying that for ordinary people in a dream, they do have dreams of blue. I don't think it's saying that blind people will dream of blue. Do the blind, who knows? Do the blind supposedly have visual dreams? It depends on what kind of blindness they have. If they had sight until, just recently and then they lost their sight, I imagine they could dream of blue. But if someone was blind from birth, I don't think they would dream of blue. So I don't think it's referring to that. The first part's referring to the fact that we can dream of blue even without eye consciousness. So why wouldn't it hold also for a blind person while awake not to have such a perception of blue because of the ripening of potential? That's the position of the Chittamatra. What do you think? Making sense? KT, is making sense? No? Not clear yet. Yeah, we have to think about it a little bit more. Let's read what the Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary is to that karika. So Jinpa's translation says, since without sight, mental cognitions that perceive blue and so on occur in a dream. So it's not referring to a blind person. It means that in a dream, you don't have the eye faculty. You don't have actual eye consciousness. You have it seems like you have an eye faculty. It seems like you have eye consciousness. So Venerable Jones' translation is a little more precise because the Tibetan says jitar mikwang, the eye faculties. Venerable Jones says, just as without the eye sense power, just as without the eye faculty in a dream, there arises a mind that is a mental consciousness to which blue and so forth appear in a dream. Okay, let's read Jimpa a little bit further there. Why would such a perception then not arise from its ripened potential for an awake blind person without eyes? So the implication is that there's a similar kind of situation. An awake blind person, they don't have the eye faculty, right? Because they're blind. Or as Mikhail clarified, they may have the material in their eye, but it is not functioning. In the back of the retina, the subtle eye faculty, some subtle matter there. So for them, the Chittamatra position is that in a dream, the reason that we perceive blue or doggies, Sean's doggy there, the reason that we perceive blue is because an imprint on the alaya vijnana has ripened at that situation, and it brings about the mental consciousness, the one element that's perceiving, and the object, let's say blue, a blue flower or whatever, or a herd of elephants, whatever. Those two come up together. It's not an eye consciousness that's perceiving the blue, but a mental consciousness due to the ripening of the imprint on alaya vijnana. So why wouldn't that happen for a blind person without the eye faculties? That's the question. So it continues. Why wouldn't it arise exactly as it would in someone with unimpaired sight? So the Chittamatra position is that a person with unimpaired eyes, with good eyes, who's not blind, doesn't have any visual impairment, they perceive blue from the Chittamatra point of view from a ripening of the potential on alaya vijnana. So why couldn't that happen for a blind person? Yeah. So Lama Tsongkhapa continues, for insofar as the eye organ is absent, insofar as they're both the same as being, both situations, dream and the blind person, are the same in not having an eye faculty. Both the dream state of a sighted person, Jimpa adds that parenthetically, Paul, you were asking whether it could mean the dream state of a blind person. Both the dream state of a sighted person and the waking state of a blind person are exactly the same, insofar as they both lack an eye faculty. The force of the argument stems from the fact that if intrinsically real cognitions can arise without any external reality, such as visible form, then there should be no difference at all between the dream and waking states. Oh. What do you think, Nadine? Are you following?
Thank you for asking. I have difficulties to follow, but I try. But I'm always wondering now, a mental consciousness, does it always, in all cases, work with visual perception? Or is it possible to have a mental consciousness without any visual images?
Is it possible to have a mental consciousness without any visual input, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. You can, right now, can you think of your mother's face?
Yes.
Yeah, the Dalai Lama's, form and so forth. You can visualize that. You can have a mental perception of that without actually any eye
Yeah,
consciousness.
yeah, but I mean, yeah, yes and no. But in the case of a blind person who never seen anything from birth,
Okay,
does
blind
this
person.
person have mental images in his mind?
Yeah, that was a question I was asking before. So it depended, say, for instance, someone who became blind later in life, who did have memories of visual consciousness, I think they could have mental images when they were subsequently became blind. But someone who was blind from birth, uh, I think it would be unlikely that they would have those.
Or visual memories from past lives also could be.
Yeah,
Yes.
if the right circumstances arose, but I think for a blind person, those would be kind of disorienting. They wouldn't necessarily be able to figure out what was happening. Um,
I came across a blind guy that when I was traveling with the Mystic Arts of Tibet
yeah.
tour that we stayed with him and we got to talking about this and he was saying that he doesn't see any forms. But he could zoom through the house like he was building a map of some sort, like so I don't
Okay, so
know if he just doesn't have
that's different. That's sort of like that's not necessarily a visual consciousness. One can a blind person, let's say who's blind from birth, uh, they can kind of have a map in their mind, where they go through you yourself in a dark room, right? You can't see anything. The lights are out. You're visiting a hotel or something. You're not really familiar with the room, so you go around the walls to find out. Oh, there's a radiator. There's a cabinet, and so forth. You can kind of generate in your own mind a map of that, but that's not the same as a visual perception.
Yeah, he was saying he didn't get any visual perception at
Okay.
all.
Okay. Nadine, what do you think?
There are two cases. One case is when being blind, like we have our eyes closed and there's just black. And the other case is just like my hand. My hand doesn't even see black. Nothing. My
Your
hand.
your
My hand
hand.
does not see anything black either, just sees nothing. My hand. Just my hand cannot see anything. Not even
Yeah.
black.
Yeah.
So what is it for a blind person? Is it just black or is it nothing?
He said it wasn't black. I mean, it was just void. He couldn't describe it as a color.
Yeah. I imagine there are different kinds of blindness. Um, I'm not well versed in this. I imagine there's some that the blindness is due to, let's say, extreme cataracts or other kinds of impairment in the eye itself. So there might be a sense of blackness, but generally blindness, I think it would be more like what Sean remembers the blind person saying, that it's just a sense of vacuity. Louise, what do you think?
Well, I studied ASL for a while with some deaf people. From what I had heard, and
Remind
there
us
was
what ASL means. I'm not sure what that means.
American Sign Language
Oh,
for
okay.
deaf people, and there were a few people blind deaf. What I had heard, the other sense back become much more enhanced. If you're going to navigate, and Mintu mentioned about sonar. I've also heard, no, seriously, I've heard about
Yeah.
people who can navigate that way. But your tactile sense, you can sense, I guess, air movements when you're close to a wall. The other senses become more enhanced to compensate, and that's how they dream with the other senses.
Yeah, the
That's all.
people
I just
that
wanted to
are
say that.
the people that are on the spectrum of autism, what is classified as autism these days, the very extreme cases also, their mental consciousness may be more acute because they withdraw their attention away from the senses. So yeah. So yeah, Minto, what do you think?
Oh, what about George? I think there are the other case where your eyes itself are actually okay, but the primary cortex is damaged, so the person can still receive visual information going to their eyes, but they cannot generate pictures in their mind about what's happening. And so there are cases where people who have these eyes that are not damaged and they can still actually like they don't see anything in front of them, but they can but their mind or their brain can still like navigate their going to a house, for example.
Okay, I'm not sure exactly what you're saying. They have their eye faculty is not damaged,
Yes,
but
but the part of the brain that is generating the vision is damaged.
oh, that so it's from that side, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so they can still receive visual information, and
Well,
and
yeah.
and part of the brain can still process it, but they cannot see like generate pictures like us, so they don't know what's in front of them. But
So for them, yeah, for them, that may be the case that one of you was mentioning that there would be a perception of blackness or something like that rather than vacuity.
yes, yes,
Okay, so let's continue on. So the force of this argument stems from the fact that if intrinsically real cognitions, inherently existent cognitions, that's the position of Chittamatra, right? That they can arise without any external reality, such as a visible form, then there should be no difference at all between dreams and waking states. So, Minto, you still have something you want to say? Okay.
I'm sorry, I forgot to click the
Okay, no problem. So the Trimpa's translation continues. The opponent might respond. So who is the opponent here?
Chittamatra.
Chittamatra, right? The reason why mental cognition, perceiving forms and so forth with clarity does not arise for a blind person, although they arise in the dream state. The reason why mental cognition, perceiving forms and so forth with clarity does not arise for a blind person along the lines experienced in a dream by the sighted is not due to the absence of eyes. It's not due to the fact that the blind person doesn't have eyes, which is what we mainly are, that it is not due to the absence of the eye faculty, let's say. If asked, okay, what do you got? What's the reason? If asked, what then is the reason? The opponent would say, the Chittamatra says, it is because the potential for the occurrence of such mental cognition has not yet matured. So the blind person doesn't have a perception of blue, not because the fact that they don't have an eye faculty, but because of the fact that the ripening of a potential has not occurred. There's not the maturation of that potential that gives rise to the consciousness and the object perceived. Therefore, the text continues, for someone in whom such a potential has matured, such as an ordinary person, we see something forms, associated mental cognition emerges for someone who has who has that mature potential. Here too, due to the condition of sleep, such mental cognition exists only in dreams, not in the waking state. So that last section is all Chittamatra from the Chittamatra point of view, right? Anna, are you following? No. Okay. So again, Lama Tsong Khapa paraphrases, that too is untenable. Deni marikte. Okay, so that's not going to hold water. Let me just read this first, Sean. The verse 66. So this is the Prasangika talking to the Chittamatra. If according to you, Chittamatra, there is the ripening of potentiality, the ripening of this imprint on alaya, for the sixth consciousness, the mental consciousness, while in dreams, but not in an awake blind person, then just as there is no ripening of potentiality of the sixth, the mental consciousness, for the blind, why can't one say that it does not exist in dreams either? It's sort of going backwards. Sean, what do you think?
I'm just kind of confused as to what the Chittamatra are saying are the actual causes of these potentialities if it has nothing to do with the I or the I faculty or I consciousness.
The
What is
potentials are due to previous imprints within the mental within the alaya vijnana. So it's mainly talking about people that have no visual impairment. We can remember those things that we saw before, right? But they also in the process of perceiving something, it leaves an imprint in the alaya vijnana to even ripen in a dream, but not ripen so that it's perceived by the I consciousness, but ripen so that it is perceived by the mental consciousness. That's their position. So it's due to previous viewing of these things. So this is referring to people that don't have that impairment. Again, getting back to the question that Paul asked, was this talking about the possibility of a blind person? So it's the blind person, assuming we mean by blind person someone who hasn't had sight from birth. They don't have any kind of imprint in the alaya. Well, as some of you said, maybe from previous lives there's something there, but they might have some disorienting dreams, but they don't have anything to correlate that with from their present experience.
So would that be considered like a lesser form of potentiality if it only can appear in mental consciousness versus in the full-on day-to-day activity?
Well, for them, it can occur in both, right?
Well,
For
right. Well, I know, but
a person with sight,
if it's saying that it's not dependent upon the I consciousness and I organ, then that means it's like it does do that for some people. Would that mean that they have a stronger version of that potentiality?
you're getting to the exact point that Chandrakirti is talking about here. Why is it? Why can that ripen for in a dream, but not ripen for a blind person? Those potentialities. So let's read what Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary says. So reading Jimpa again. So he's just commenting on this verse. Why that ended? Why can't one say that it does not exist in dreams either? For if according to you, Chittamatra, there is the ripening of potentiality for the mental consciousness in dreams, the sixth consciousness, but not in an awake blind person. There's not the ripening of potentiality for mental consciousness to perceive things for a blind person. Then just as there is no ripening of potentiality of the sixth consciousness, such as those to which forms and so forth appear clearly for the blind, in the same way that blind people don't have that mental consciousness perceiving forms while they're awake, why can't one say that it does not exist in dreams either? Not to do so would be logical. Is that right? Or is it? That's what Jimpa's text says, right?
I think he's saying that if it doesn't arise for the blind, then it shouldn't arise in dreams either. So that would be consistent, I think is what he's saying. That would be consistent if you say it doesn't arise in either.
Right. So Venerable Jones says, let's see, if according to you there exists in a dream the ripening of potential for mental consciousness, the sixth consciousness, I think that's a good way of putting it. So Chandrakirti is using the sixth here because, in the Chittamatra, they're talking about 8 consciousnesses, right? Not just sixth. So just pointing that out. If according to you there exists in a dream the ripening of potentials for mental consciousness, the sixth consciousness, whereas it does not exist when awake, then just as there is when awake, then just as here, that is, when awake, there does not exist for the blind the ripening of potentials for the clear perception of forms and so forth to the mental consciousness. It's not saying the blind should see through their eye consciousness, but why can't there be a perception of blue for to the mental consciousness for the blind person? The mental consciousness, the sixth consciousness. In the same way, why would it be unsuitable to say it does not exist at the time of a dream? It would, she has in brackets, in fact, in bracket, be suitable to say that. Yeah, that's more clear, I think. It would be suitable to say that. It would be suitable to say that it shouldn't be existing in a dream either. How are we doing? Making sense? Don, what do you think?
Struggling a little bit to follow it.
Yeah, I am too. So that we're in the same, where you can feel good. You've got a companion and that. Okay. Louise, are you okay? Okay. So let's go. Next line here in Jimpa's translation. Here too, the argument trades upon, and then in brackets, the opponent's assumption of intrinsic existence. So the Chittamatra assumption is that consciousness is inherently existent or intrinsically existent, right? The argument trades upon that, which is the object to be negated. From the Prasangika point of view, the intrinsic inherent existence of consciousness is something that is not true. It's to be negated. Now, if you, the Chittamatra, the opponent, are going to engage in discourse by relying on mere words with no supporting reasons, we too can be content by leaving it at what we have already stated so far. A little bit unclear. Furthermore, just like with a blind person, there is no active functioning of the sense organ. Okay. Furthermore, like with a blind person, there is no active functioning of the eye faculty, which is the basis of cognition. in the case of seeing experienced in a dream, I didn't put that in the right order there. Furthermore, just like with the blind person, there is no active functioning of the eye faculty in the case of seeing experience during a dream. Just like a blind person, there is no active functioning of the eye faculty in the case of seeing experience in a dream, right? So the cognition in that dream state cannot be a mental cognition that has emerged from the maturation of a potentiality associated with a perception pattern of visual cognition that, in turn, arose in dependence on a potentiality called the eye organ. Whoa. Is that clear? I can tell Ron is contemplating that he's trying to experience what a blind person, by putting his hands over his eyes there, what a blind person would be experiencing. Okay, let's see what Venerable Joan, how Venerable Joan translated that last part. Let's just read the whole section there. Furthermore, this is a system which is based on the object of negation. For her reading of that, Diang Gakchala Tukpe Luxo. Yeah, that's more literally what the text is. Furthermore, this is a system, that means the Chittamatra system, the Yogacara, is a system that is based on the object of negation. The object of negation in this case is inherent existence, right? That's what is, from the Prasangika point of view, is being negated. They base their system on the existence of that, the existence of inherent existence. If someone speaks mere words without logic, we are permitted to say, as above. Because sight in a dream, like that of a blind person when awake, sight in a dream, like that of a blind person when awake, lacks a functioning sense faculty, sense power. The consciousness supported on an eye faculty, an eye sense power, which is called, quote, a potential that takes the aspect of the object, is not a mental consciousness that arises from the transformation of a ripened potential for mental consciousness. Is that clear? How do you read that, Paul? What's it trying to say here?
Yeah.
Good luck.
Well, I'll tell you, Venerable George, the first thought that came to my mind was, if we take a break right now, then that'll give me 5 minutes to think about it.
Yeah, we could do a break now. Let's just see.
Okay, a little early, but sure. What
Yeah,
would you like?
let's just go. Let's just read a little bit more here to
Venerable
put it in
George?
context. Let's see. Let's read what Chimpa said here. Again, going back. Here too, the argument trades upon the opponent's assumption of intrinsic existence. Remember what Venerable Jones said. The Tibetan says Diyang at the beginning of the sentence. Jimpa translated it that here too, here in this situation, whereas Venerable Joan just translated as furthermore. This is a system which is based on the object of negation. Jimpa Trent, sort of Chinese style, sort of thinking what the meaning is. Here, the argument trades upon the opponent's assumption of intrinsic existence, which is the object to be negated. Now, if you, Chittamatra, are going to engage in discourse by relying on mere words, with no supporting reason. So what's he talking about here? The Chittamatra is saying it just doesn't happen that it ripens for a blind person. The mental consciousness perceiving blue, the imprint just doesn't happen for them. So he's not giving any reasons, no supporting reasons. So if you do that, we too can be content by leaving it at what we have already stated so far. Furthermore, just like with the blind person, right, there is no active functioning of the sense organ. In the case of seeing that is experienced during a dream, so the cognition in that dream state cannot be a mental cognition that has emerged from the maturation of a potentiality associated with a perceptual pattern of visual cognition that in turn arose in dependence on a potentiality called the eye organ. Okay, so before we delve into that, so remember for Chittamatra, there is not an actual eye sense faculty as a physical entity that is a different entity from the consciousness, right? They say that the eye faculty itself is just a potentiality on the alaya vijnana. Just to clarify that. So let's read again the section in Venerable Jones' translation. This last section where Jimpa is talking about emerge from a maturation of a potentiality associated with the perceptual pattern of visual cognition. I don't know where he's getting that from. Venerable Joan had said, furthermore, this is a system which is based on the object of negation. If someone speaks mere words, you Chittamatrans, without logic, we are permitted to say as above. That is, we're permitted to say, why can't it should occur for a blind person when awake. They should have that mental consciousness, or else it shouldn't occur for a person with sight during a dream. We can say that. Because sight in a dream, like that of the blind when awake, lacks a functioning sense power. They're the same. The consciousness supported on an eye sense power, which is called a potential. Remember, that's what I just explained a second ago. For the Chittamatra, the eye sense power is just a potential in the consciousness. There's not an actual entity out there. We talked about that before. The consciousness supported on an eye sense power, I say, because sight in a dream, like that of the blind when awake, lacks a functioning sense power. The consciousness supported on an eye sense power, which is called a potential, that takes the aspect of an object. Okay, so what are we talking about here? A consciousness supported on an eye sense power. The eye faculty, which is actually for Chittamatra a potential, that takes on the aspect of that object, is not a mental consciousness that arises from the transformation of a ripened potential for mental consciousness. Okay, good time to take a break. Okay, so while everyone else is running out to take a break, Paul is going to think about it. Okay, good. We had a little, some discussion. So now I'm going to ask Paul, what do you think?
Okay, Venerable George. So that statement, so where he says, furthermore, just like with the blind person, so etc., I would actually kind of rearrange the phrases. I would say, furthermore, there is no active functioning of the sense organ. That is, there's no active functioning of the eye sense power. in the case of seeing experience during a dream, just like with the blind person, right? So what he's saying is that
you're just changing the order.
I'm just changing the order because I think the
Yeah,
analogy made it
that's good.
confusing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So there's no active functioning of the sense organ in the case of seeing experience in a dream, just like with a blind person, right?
Right.
And so then he's saying, so the cognition in a dream state. So what he's saying is normally with an external world, you'd say that the arising of a mental cognition has emerged from the maturation of the potential. Or you would say that you get the mental perception from a previous moment of visual perception, right?
Right.
And he's saying, but that's not happening here, right? He's saying in the dream, there's no previous visual perception to trigger a mental perception. So if you're blind, it doesn't matter because there's no previous, just like in a dream, there's no previous visual perception to trigger the mental perception. If you're blind, there's no previous visual perception to trigger a mental perception. So therefore, if you can see in a dream, you should be able to see when you're blind.
So that's again that is contingent upon this Chittamatra assumption that the consciousness is inherently existent,
right?
And that it could not that from the Prasangika point of view, if that were the case, it would have to depend on something else, such as the previous moment. Is that
right?
Okay.
That's how I'm understanding it.
Okay.
I think it's also getting to the point that the to even call it a potentiality based upon that sense organ requires there to be a sense organ. If there's no sense organ, then you can't talk about a potentiality of that sense organ.
Right, but I think the argument they're making is that it doesn't matter because if you're saying waking life is like a dream, in a dream, the mental perception is not connected to visual perception. So in a waking state, it wouldn't be connected to a visual perception either. If being awake is like a dream.
Yeah.
And so therefore, being blind is meaningless. It doesn't actually have any bearing on whether you can see or not if you can see in a dream. And I guess the other one that I was going to say, Venerable George, was the notion about a blind person. What do they see? Right? It's like I keep thinking of the story of the elephant and the 5 blind people, right? And so you can build a 3-dimensional image of an object based on touch.
Right.
Which is why I would imagine that a blind person can walk through their house because they have a 3-dimensional image of their house in their mind, even though it's not, right, even though there's no color to it, but there's still shape that they can navigate, I would think.
Distance, how many steps, they remember how many steps there is to that wall and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Okay, so this as one of you said, maybe Mikhail was asking, or someone was asking whether we debate this in the debating courtyard. Who said that? I can't remember. Yeah, this is something getting a little bit subtle here. Let's continue on. Okay, so the next verse, 667, Jimpa starts out by putting in brackets. To continue, the root text says, so verse 667. So just as eyeglasses, I keep on reading that wrong. I remember reading this a couple of weeks ago and reading eyeglasses, eyelessness, just as the lack of eyes, just as eyelessness is not the cause for such ripening. In dreams too, sleep is not the cause for such activation. So you must conclude that even in a dream, the dream site and the objects are causes for false subjects. Whoa, again. Yeah, is that clear to anyone just reading it like that?
all made
Nadine,
more sense.
Nadine, is it clear?
No, but George, it's not clear for me.
Okay, let's see how Venerable Joan translated that.
It's a
So
typo.
just as eyelessness, so she says, just as a lack of eyes, jitar mikme, she just says the lack of eyes, just as the non-existence of eyes is not the cause of that. Likewise, also in a dream, sleep is not the cause. Then the second part of that verse, or because of that, you must conclude that even in a dream, things, comma, the eyes, the eye, comma, and also object possessors are asserted to be the cause of perception. Yeah, just reading that, first of all, that doesn't lead to clarity of what he's saying, right? So let's see what Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary says about that. Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary in Jimba's translation says, so just as eyelessness, just as the lack of eyes, is not the cause in an awake blind person for such ripening of the propensity for perceiving external objects. Is that right?
According to the Chittamatra, yeah.
Yeah. So we're arguing against the Chittamatra, right? So Chittamatra would say that the lack of eyes, or the lack of an eye faculty, that was their position, is not the cause for a blind person ripening of the propensity of perceiving external objects. Is that the Chittamatra position, or is that the Prasangika position? The lack of eyes, so what does it say? Decher mikme sepe longwa dila. Let's see. So Venerable Joan translates this as, therefore, just as a lack of eyes is not the cause for the ripening of the latencies, the imprints, for perceiving objects in the blind who are awake. Okay, so let's take step by step. A blind person who is awake does not have eyes in the sense of eye faculties or eye consciousness, right? So therefore, just as the lack of eyes is not the cause of the ripening of the latencies for perceiving objects in the blind who are awake, likewise, also in a dream, sleep is not the cause of the ripening of latencies for perceiving external objects, because if an inherently existent consciousness were produced without external objects, it would not depend on the ripening of latencies. And her text, I'll just read a little further in her translation. Because of that, you must concede that even in a dream, things, comma, the eye, comma, and also object possessors are asserted to be the cause of perception. Well, that's her translation of the last two lines of that stanza. She's put it in that place. Therefore, because of the production of false consciousnesses, I have difficulty when there's SSES. It's difficult to see if it's my eyes seeing if it's consciousness or consciousnesses. Therefore, because of the production of the false consciousnesses that perceive dream objects from false latencies, you, the opponent, Chittamatra, must concede that also in a dream, just as when awake, this is a couple of things that are objects, the false consciousness that has the appearance of form and so forth, and thirdly, the I of a dream are asserted to become the cause, that is the basis of perception, consciousness. Wow. Okay. Again, this is, there were many sections in our text where we could just read through it once and maybe just make some observation about it. But here, Chandrakirti is getting into the deep, what do we say? The deep grass? You know that expression?
The weeds.
The deep weeds, yeah. In this case, well, we want to call it the Dharma, the weeds. So let's see. Anyone would like to make an explanation? Mikhail, what do you think?
Not an explanation, just puzzling over the first sentence there in Johan's translation.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, therefore, just as a lack of eyes is not the cause of the ripening of latencies for the appearance of objects. That's how could anyway the lack of eyes cause an appearance?
Right. So, Dechir Mikmepa Sepe Longwa Dila. So for this blind person who is awake, the lack of eyes, Donangi Bakchak Mimpa Gyupa Mimpa. It is not the cause of ripening the bakchak, the imprints of the appearance of objects, dongnangwa. It seems to be more or less literal translation of that, but as you say, what does that mean? Just as the lack of eyes is not the cause of the ripening of latencies, perceiving objects in the blind who were awake. What's this getting at?
It seems like very absurd thing to say. If I mean, Tsongkhapa is denying that, but asserting that would be really strange. That the absence of eye would cause ripening. No.
So just as the lack of eyes is not the cause of the ripening of latencies, perceiving objects in the blind who are awake. Well, we could say that is true, isn't it? That is true. The lack of eyes, the fact that a blind person who is awake, the fact that they don't have the eyes, let's say eye faculty, make it simpler. They don't have an eye faculty that's functioning. The fact that they don't have that is not causing the ripening of the potentials, the latencies on the alaya vijnana to perceive objects. So do the blind have the ripening of potentials to see objects?
No.
No, in general they don't, right? So the lack of eyes is not the cause of the ripening of the latencies. So maybe he's referring to the next phrase here. Likewise, also in a dream, sleep is not the cause of the ripening of latencies. Sleep is not the cause. What did he say? Is the lack of eyes is not the cause here. Sleep is not the cause of the ripening of latencies for perceiving external objects. because if an inherently existent consciousness were produced without external objects, it would not depend on the ripening of latencies. Again, what Lama what Chandrakirti is getting at, because Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to this is all based on Chandrakirti, right? It's not Lama Tsongkhapa's interpretation, but he doesn't explain much here about that. So I think on Monday, when we have discussion group, we can go through this point again. This is a little bit, I think a little bit difficult. What do you think, Paul? Are you making any sense out of this?
Yeah, slowly. I think the problem is that he seems to be offering two counter arguments at the same time. There's the one about sort of the causes in the absence of an external world, but then he's also bringing in the anti-inherent existence argument for consciousness. So it's like he's making two counter arguments that are different.
Right. So those are the two arguments that are being refuted by the Prasangika, right? Chittamatra asserts no external world, that is an entity of the mind, and they assert that the mind is inherently existent. So that's to point out. So there's those two statements there are corresponding to that. So and then generally what we would say the cause of the perceiving external objects, not talking Chittamatra, the causes for perceiving external objects are the presence of the external object and the functioning eye faculty, let's say, if you're talking about eye consciousness, and the previous moment of consciousness, right? Those three factors generally. So here, just as the lack of eyes is not the cause, eyelessness is not the cause in an awake blind person for such ripening of the propensity for perceiving external objects. Yeah, so there is no ripening from the Chittamatra point of view. There is no ripening of the propensity for perceiving external objects in a blind person when awake, right? So, yeah, it's hard to understand at first why he's stating there eyelessness. The lack of eyes is not a cause of that. Sleep in dreams too. So in the same way, in dreams, sleep is not the cause of the maturation of the propensities for perceiving external objects in dreams. For if intrinsically real cognition can arise without external reality, so this is the second argument that Paul was talking about. One is talking about the external world, and now if intrinsically real cognition, if inherently real cognition can arise without external reality, such cognition would not depend on the maturing of potentialities at all. Okay, so one way to think about these kind of cryptic things is that Chandrakirti was prophesized to Lama Tsongkhapa, or was stated to Lama Tsongkhapa by, I think it was Manjushri or Vajrapani, I can't remember which, to be a 10th level bodhisattva who had come to the world to elucidate Nagarjuna's intent. So these kind of things, this particular section is we're trying to get into Chandrakirti's mindset. What is he thinking here? What's he talking about? Because he is what we say in modern parlance, he's a deep thinker, right? He knows this very well, so he has some instinct that this is important to point out. So we can go, on Monday, we will try to go through this again and distill the essence of that next week for those who can't attend on Monday. So let's leave that paragraph as it is right there and go on to the next paragraph. Are you okay with that? Okay. No one needs more right now. Okay, so that's see if you can ferret out. Also, perhaps the translation of that, I will go back to look at Geshe Zopa. I didn't check Geshe Zopa's commentary on that. I'll go back and check Geshe Zopa's commentary on that for our Monday discussion and see if he had any comments on that. Okay, so Lama Tsongkhapa continues. So, one member of the class who transcribes the teachings said that there were some 100,000 or something times I say "so" in certain teachings. I begin so Jimpa's using that here. So, since it is from unreal propensities that unreal cognitions perceiving dream objects arise. So what does that mean? Unreal potentialities?
I think that's the Prasangika take. Non-inherently existing propensities and non-inherently existing cognitions.
Yeah, so when Jiva says unreal propensities here, what is the Tibetan there? Gangshir Bakchak Zumba, yeah. So Zumba means false, right? Remember when we talk about truth and falsity, from the Prasangika point of view, that which is true has a characteristic that its mode of appearance is the same as its mode of existence. That which is false, like the car dealer who's telling you this is a good deal on the car, smiling, so the appearance seems to be one way, but the reality is something different, right? True and false. So Gangichir Bakchak Zumba Le, so from false potentialities, how did Jimpa translate that? Unreal propensities, the unreal or false cognitions perceiving dream objects arise. So that means that they are not inherently existent. You, the opponent, must concede that even in a dream, just as in the case in the waking state, dream sight and its objects, such as forms and so on, are causes for false subjects. Milam gi mik tokpate, napa shepe gyute, tendugyuba kina. I don't see subject in there. Sepe. Let's see. Venerable Joan translated, therefore, because of the production of false consciousnesses that perceive dream objects from false latencies, you, the opponent, must concede that also in a dream, just as when awake, things that are objects, for one, the false consciousness that has the appearance of forms and so forth, and three, the I of a dream, are asserted to become the cause that is the basis of perception, consciousness. So she doesn't have the word false subjects in there. I'm not sure what how Jimpa is coming to that. Again, this is something we can try to sort out. Let's continue a little bit. The commentary states in this context, so this is reading from the Rangdel, the auto commentary to his own Karikas by Chandrakirti. When an object is experienced in a dream, it is perceived in terms of the convergence of three factors. So that note 589 just refers to the text, the text of Chandrakirti's auto commentary, just where you'd find it in that text. Again, he declares, Chandrakirti declares, that in a dream state, no sense objects or eye faculty or any visual cognition is produced by these two, or any visual cognition produced by these two exists. Again, he declares, Chandrakirti declares that in a dream state, no sense objects or eye faculties or any visual cognition produced by these two exist. So those are the three factors, the visual consciousness, the eye faculty, and the object. Those are the three things that are necessary. So if you talk about just the consciousness that arises because of them, there are two things. In a dream state, there's no sense objects. There's no herd of wild elephants and so forth, no actual blue flower or whatever. There's no actual eye faculty that's active in the dream. That's not being activated. Or any visual consciousness produced by these two exists. These statements indicate that for Chandrakirti, all three factors, the sense faculty, the sense organ, the object, and the mental faculty associated with the five sense perceptions, such as visual perception, where usually we're talking about seeing something in the dream, but you can hear things in the dream and smell and taste and so forth. They are perceived within the perspective of the person who is actually dreaming. All of them are from the Chandrakirti's point of view, they are perceived in the perspective of the person who is actually dreaming. So these statements indicate that Chandrakirti does not accept the existence of dream eyes, dream eye perception, and dream objects. That's what we usually would say, right? This is not to say that he admits that they exist as eyes and so forth in actuality. No, sorry, I said did not. So these statements indicate that Chandrakirti does accept the existence of dream eyes, dream perception, and dream objects, but this is not to say that he admits that they exist as eyes and so forth in actuality, that they are actual eyes. They are just the experience to that mental consciousness. This is analogous to the case where even though one might accept the presence of magically conjured horses, elephants, and humans, beautiful ladies or handsome men, whatever, we accept the presence of those, but in doing so, that in no way entails admitting that such things are actually horses, elephants, and humans. Yeah, Mikhail, you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, just about the three factors mentioned. We are talking about the three, our usual three conditions for the arising of consciousness, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I believe so. Okay, so let's just read a little bit further here. So again, this is something that you can go back and look at and see. John Kemble is off in England. I think I told the story last week, right? That I had misread some communication from him that he was going to meet Kang in England, and I had misread it as King. That I was thinking that he and Robert Thurman were seeing the king, but he was meeting Kang, who's the son of Pun King, who who attends our classes virtually, after they're recorded, because in Singapore it's like Jeremy, it's late in the night there. So John and Paul might want to take a look at the Tibetan and see whether that could be translated in a different way. Both Venerable Joan and Jimpa translated in a way that seems kind of perplexing, or whether there's some deeper meaning there that we're not getting at. Okay, so let's go on to the next verse. The next verse, the way that Jimpa breaks it up, he puts 3 lines here. Whatever responses they may present, whatever the Chittamatra may try to argue in response to our debate with them, whatever responses can be viewed as akin to their thesis. Therefore, this contention is brought to an end. And some of you might say, phew. So what does that mean? So the commentary to that says, in view of these, in brief, whatever responses Chittamatra may present to the Madhyamaka, they can be viewed as akin to their thesis, something yet to be proven. Whatever Chittamatra may present to the Madhyamaka can be viewed as akin to their thesis, something that is yet to be proven. So they haven't offered any proofs of their statements. Any kind of responses that they may make have not been proved. Therefore, this contention, the assertion of consciousness only, of mind only, is brought to an end or rebuffed. So Venerable Joan, I don't have Venerable Joan's translation of that directly here. That's 668. What does she say here? Yeah. Therefore, this being the case, I'm not sure if she's paraphrasing Jimpa again or not. Therefore, this being the case, since Chittamatrans giving such and such a reply to the Madhyamikas is seen to accord with this and that thesis, and then she says, i.e., probandum not being established, this debate, the propounding of mere cognition, is eliminated, that is, overcome. If this is expressed as an example, it is as follows. When the Madhyamikas set out the statement, at the time of waking, the 3 objects, sense powers, and consciousnesses are empty of inherent existence because they are observed. For example, like a dream. So let's see how Jimpa is presenting this. So this is where this is presenting some syllogisms from the Prasangika point of view and the Chittamatra point of view. This is where we're going to end, but let's just go through it, read it, and try to understand a little bit before next week. Jimpa's, after 668a to c, Jimpa's translation of Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary says, in view of these, in brief, whatever Chittamatra may present to the Madhyamaka, they can be viewed as akin to their thesis, something yet to be proven. Yeah, we read that before. Therefore, this contention, the assertion of consciousness only, is brought to an end or rebuffed, as we said, with relief. Let me illustrate these rebuttals by way of a few examples. And I think Jimpa's note at a certain point indicates that this is taken almost verbatim from Chandrakirti. Let me illustrate these rebuttals by way of a few examples. So this is Prasangika refuting the Chittamatra. For example, the Madhyamaka present the following argument. subject. You know, when we talk about a syllogism, we talk about the subject, the predicate, and the reason. Here he calls the predicate the probandum. I think we talked about this before, Paul, the probandum is generally the subject and the predicate, right? So I think that's not exactly right the way he is. So subject, the three factors, the objects, the sense faculties, and the consciousnesses of the waking state are empty of intrinsic existence, are empty of inherent existence. That's the predicate. Usually the subject and the predicate together are called the probandum, but okay, take it anyway. The three factors of the waking state are empty of inherent existence, and the third, you have to have the reason, the subject, the predicate, and the reason. The reason is because they are perceived. Is that a good syllogism? The three factors, let's take any one of them. Let's say the objects of the waking state are empty of an inherent existence because they are perceived. Is that good? Is that a good syllogism? Can you prove that things are not inherently existent because they are perceived?
Perception requires the conditions. So if they are inherently existent, then there is no perception. No?
If they are inherently existent, there's no perception of them?
If they inherently exist, then they cannot function as conditions for perception. So there is
Right.
no perception.
Okay, maybe. Exemplification. So when we have a syllogism, generally we have to have the three factors, the subject, the predicate, and the reason. And then there has to be a fourth element, an example. And here he says exemplification, like, for example, a dream. The three factors, object, sense faculty, and consciousness of the waking state, are empty of intrinsic existence because they are perceived, exemplification, like a dream. So Venerable Jones' translation of that first, can I get that here? When the Madhyamikas set out the statement, quote, at the time of waking, the three, objects, sense powers, and consciousnesses, are empty of inherent existence because they are observed, for example, like a dream. In response, Thupten Jinpa's translation says, Chittamatra presents the following. Cognition of waking state is devoid of external reality. So these are these three things. She's taking this, the subject, cognition of the waking state. Second, the predicate, what is to be proved, is devoid of external reality. Cognition of the waking state is devoid of external reality. Quote, reason, because it is a cognition. Like, for example, dream consciousness. Then a second thing that they present, the objects perceived during the waking state, subject, are false because they are objects, like, for example, dream objects. These are the supposed syllogisms that are presented by the Chittamatra. Third, these are separate. Likewise, if there exists no dependent nature, which is the basis for the afflicted and the enlightened classes of phenomena, the pure classes of phenomena. Remember when we talk about the 108 classes of phenomena, 108 topics, they're divided into, 55 and 53 classes. What are the 55 are the pure class or the afflicted class, Mikhail?
I'm not sure. I think the biggest one is the pure class, but I'm not sure.
55 of the pure class. So he says the enlightened class, or the pure class and the afflicted class. Then phenomena of both the afflicted and the enlightened classes will have no existence. This is because they will have no basis. Like a cloak made of turtle hair. Yeah, I think Sean may have one in his closet. His toupee may be made of turtle hair. So do turtles have hair? Louise is dubious. So that's a cloak.
Scale.
This is because they will have no basis. Like a cloak made of turtle hair has no basis because there's no such thing as turtle hair. Likewise, we will also explain this by means of an analogy of eyes infected by this myodesopsia, that is the floaters. Their rejoinders are of this sort. So let's just finish reading this before the next session. This is what we will start next time before the next session. As for the first two syllogisms of Chittamatra, since their exemplifications remain unestablished, their examples are unestablished, the reasons they offer remain the same as their theses. So a thesis, what would a thesis be in terms of subject, predicate, and reason? What is a thesis? Don?
That these three are not inherently existent.
Well, just in general, what does the word thesis mean in terms of subject, predicate, and reason?
The predicate.
I think thesis would be the probandum, the subject and the predicate, right? So sound, subject, is impermanent. That's a thesis. Okay. So they're rejoined. So as for the first two syllogisms of Chittamatra, since their exemplifications remain unestablished, the reasons they offer remain the same as their theses. So they're just asserting something. They have a thesis, but they don't have any proof of it. This is because in a dream state, there do exist mental object forms that are of a different nature from mental consciousness. In my own text, I have this highlighted in a different color because this is Lama Tsongkhapa's assertion that in a dream state, there are mental object forms. Remember, we talked about this before, that they are actually categorized as forms, even though they are just, they have no kind of physical reality. Similar to the kinds of forms like non-revelatory forms. When you take a vow, you can't perceive them. With respect to the third argument that the Chittamatra proposed, the opponent's intention is to prove the existence of an inherently real basis for the afflicted and unafflicted classes of phenomena. They want to say that the basis for phenomena are inherently existent. If the assertion is that no such basis will exist, the reason will be unestablished. If, however, the intended basis is something with intrinsic reality, then there will be no there will be no entailment. Or as Venerable Jones says, the third syllogism does not establish that a mere basis does not exist. Jimba says, with respect to the third argument, the opponent's intention is to prove the existence of an intrinsically real basis for the unafflicted classes. afflicted and unafflicted classes of phenomena. If the assertion is that no such basis will exist, the reason will be unestablished. Quite different translation. Venerable Jones says, the third syllogism does not establish that a mere basis does not exist. Jimpa doesn't say that at all, does he? Interesting. The third syllogism does not establish that a mere basis does not exist. What does that mean? Even if you were to accept Chittamata's assertion, Prasangika would say that a mere basis, the merely existent objects, merely existent faculties, merely existent consciousness do exist. So she says the third syllogism does not establish that a mere basis does not exist, whereas thinking that the basis, this is, I guess she has in brackets, the basis of the thoroughly afflicted and the completely pure, unbracket, is established by way of its own character. It is indefinite. Okay, again, deep grass. We'll try to do some mowing, like my yard. We'll try to do some mowing of this deep grass next Monday and present some, when I have a chance to look at Geshe Sopa's commentary again, next class, just to finish off this before we begin the next section. How refuting the Chittamatra standpoint does not contradict the scriptures. Okay. So Chittamatra would like to say that unless that some scriptures like the Lankavatara Sutra and so forth say that there is alaya vijnana, that the consciousness is inherently existent, that the three realms are mind only and so forth. But the next section is going to go into saying that refuting the Chittamatra does not contradict the scriptures. The scriptures are saying something different. Okay, this is I think, quite tough class, quite tough topic, this section, refuting that position. So before we dedicate the virtues that we had in patiently, listening and trying to understand, and due to the force of our motivation, does anyone have any questions or comment they wanted to make? For Nadine, you have something, first.
Thank you. I was wondering when we say that all we can perceive are shape and color with the eye consciousness.
Right.
Or we can, what about light?
What about light? Yeah. What
We
about
can
it?
also perceive light, right? Not only shape and color. It should be
Light
shape,
is.
color, and light.
What about red color? What about red light? I mean, all light has some color, doesn't it?
Yes.
You have
Right.
light, blue, clear light, white light. When we say clear light, do you perceive clear light with your eye consciousnesses? Let's just talk in a worldly sense, clear light. So what would clear light mean? Looking at the sky that's not dark or blue. Usually it has some light, it has some color, right? So the something which is clear that doesn't have any color is such a light, such a colored light perceived by the eyes.
Probably
Light
not.
without any color.
I don't know, but for me, I think light is different from color. It's not the same as color.
You can say, the words, and the objects say, is a white horse white, Nadine?
No.
Why not?
Because white is a color and the horse is not a color.
Horse is a person, right? Yeah. So the colors are something that are perceived when we see objects, but also you can have colors appearing when you were talking about light. You could just have light without any other object there, but those lights are always perceived via their colors. So when we say that the domain of eye consciousness is shape and color, that really does include all of the possibilities, if you think about it. Okay. Anyone else have a thought? Want to share? Okay, so don't forget, I'll mention again, in there's a link there to a YouTube video of Lama Zopa's teaching on the 8 precepts. So Tuesday, we mentioned this now because obviously not everyone comes to the Monday discussion group. On Tuesday is the anniversary of the, what is it? The Descent from the Heaven of 33, but I'm trying to think of I saw on the Nalanda page, which month. I think it's the 22nd day of the Tibetan month, which happens to fall on the 11th of November this year. So it's not always November 11th. It goes by the lunar calendar. So if you wanted to take the precepts, that may give you a heads up onto that. Okay, so let's try to dedicate the virtues that we created by patiently enduring this torturous mental activity due to these virtues we've created today, in listening mainly, contemplating. We try to contemplate and maybe meditate a bit on it. The virtues also impelled by the motivation that we created at the beginning. Due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that very same state, that same state of a Guru Buddha. And furthermore, due to these merits, may the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen and grown, that has not arisen in my mind and the mind of others, may that bodhicitta arise and grow due to these virtues. And may that which has arisen, bodhicitta that has arisen in my mind, some little sprouts, and in the mind of others, not diminish due to these virtues, but as a result of these virtues, increase more and more. And then for the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the conquerors, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, Conqueror Losang, spiritual father and sons, together with your lineages, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, so the two ways to spread the teachings, through your verbal explanation or maybe written explanation, and by your practice. Lama Zopa doing all of these amazing practices. You, Lama Zopa, wore the patience, the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefits and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. You entered nirvana, so to speak, parinirvana. You passed away. At this I lost hope. I was bereft. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the Triple Gem and the great waves of bodhicitta, of the Bodhisattvas, the children of the conquerors, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And finally, for all of our spiritual friends, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures. When we talk about high faculties and so forth. So to be able to view, to understand Kawe Mik, to read and to understand all of the infinite scriptures. You are like eyeballs for me to be able to do that. You opened them up. Supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means moved by mercy, love, and compassion. Illuminating spiritual friends, I make this request. Please live long and stable lives. Okay, thank you for your patience. Yeah, this was a tough one. Hopefully, we're getting to a point where we're, there's just a little bit more about Chittamatra, especially about the, here, that the Chittamatra is, when we talked about this next section that's coming up, that the scriptures do not actually teach exactly what Chittamatra proposes that they do, that there's only mind only and so forth. But also there's another section about refuting the Chittamatra view of self-knowing, self-cognizers, Rangrik. So thank you very much. Look forward to seeing some of you on Monday when we can hopefully go over this and get a little more clarity what Chandrakirti was saying. See you then. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable George.